Hello, welcome to Summerfest Online 2020. Thank you very much for coming along to view these presentations. Just a quick reminder that we have a number of exhibitors in the exhibitors hall. If you want to go along and have a quick browse, maybe do some shopping, then we'd love to see you. And a quick reminder too about our wonderful sponsors, Yayo Hemp Products and Butte Island Cheese. They're also in the exhibitors hall and they'd love to see you too. If you've enjoyed the show, please remember this is a free event, and if you'd like to make a small donation, you'd be very welcome. Please go to the Friends of VegFest page to make a donation. And a reminder too, we have another show in November, London Online, and in next March, Plant Powered Expo. And you can find out all about that on VegfestUK. Thanks very much and enjoy the presentation.
Hello there and welcome to this talk. I'm so excited to be with you today, and my job is to talk you through a really important topic, which is nutrition and how it can affect our mental health. How does what we eat affect our thoughts and our feelings? So I thought I'd start off by really asking the question, what kind of problem are we dealing with? Well, it's really common. According to the mental health charity Mind, about 1 in 4 people suffer some sort of mental health problem every single year. This means that the chances are that everyone in this room has either suffered a mental health problem or loves someone who has. That's the simple truth. My father was a good, kind soul, but suffered terribly in life with severe depression. He had suicide attempts, electroconvulsive therapy, hospital admissions, and ultimately premature death from heart disease. His life was chaotic, confusing, and ultimately it ended early because of the risk factors for heart disease that he was prone to because of his depression. And I know that I'm not alone in this tragedy. I see this every day that I'm at work in my patients. I'm a senior partner to busy medical practice, and in my 15 years as a doctor, I've seen firsthand the impact of mental health on the body in every specialty that I've experienced, from gynecology and urology to general surgery and beyond. And I would have to say that since being a GP and working in the same practice for 11 years, stress and mental health problems seem to be a factor in at least 80% of the patients that I see personally. All right, so let's have a little look at the stats. The Mental Health Foundation tells us that 1 in 10 children have mental health problems, which would include things like depression, anxiety, and conduct disorders. Rates of self-harm are also on the rise. The APMS provides England's national statistics, and it tells us that 1 in 6 adults has a common mental disorder. And there's actually more common in women, about 1 in 5, and then 1 in 8 men. This would include things like depression, OCD, and post-traumatic stress. And why is it so important to address this? Well, not only does it cause personal tragedy and have a wider impact on society, but research also tells us that being happy is associated with a lower risk of dying. A systematic review of 70 studies of both well and unwell populations, which was published in the Journal of Psychosomatic Medicine, suggests that a positive mood, being satisfied with life, having an optimistic outlook, and a sense of humour has a really favourable effect on survival in both healthy and unwell populations, which I find really fascinating. And it turns out that a happy disposition also seems to mean we're less likely to get sick in the first place. Scientists at Carnegie Mellon University took hundreds of people and paid them money to let them drip cold and flu viruses into their nostrils to see who would get sick and who would not. They were paid about £500 each, or the equivalent of that. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd fancy doing that really. Maybe when I was a student I would have done it. But anyway, what happened? Well, we know that we don't always get sick when we're exposed to viruses and bacteria, and as you would have predicted, not everybody got sick, but those who were scored as anxious, hostile, or depressed had about a 1 in 3 chance of getting unwell. What was interesting is that those who were scored as happy Even after taking into account poor sleep patterns and poor exercise patterns and stress levels, only 1 in 5 of them ended up getting sick. So, how can we boost our chances of being happy? Well, as the talk implies, our food does have something to do with it. The problem that we face is that the food industry spends millions in order to make foods that satisfy our salt, our sugar, and our fat cravings. And this makes us sicker and ironically less happy as a result. Now, being honest, I have in the past reached for a chocolate bar or maybe a dessert to satisfy a craving or get an immediate feeling of calm. I'm sure many of us do this, perhaps with a glass of wine or a bag of crisps or whatever it is. And it's just unfortunate that when we are low, we're far more likely to reach for a donut than a plate of steamed broccoli. Food manufacturers spend millions to hack our brains and make foods that we can become addicted to. They manufacture foods with dynamic contrast, which gives just the right amount of crunch or melt in the mouth sensation, and they often put emulsifiers in the foods to increase our salivary response, and they add chemicals to make us feel more hungry. They add more sugar and fat to keep us craving more, and then add to that the toxic advertising and the feel-good memories of these junk foods, and we're fighting an industrial machine to win our health back. But what if there were some simple ways to bring us back in control of our physical and our mental health? And that's what I aim to show you in this talk. So what we're going to be covering is hopefully giving you an understanding of what we can eat to improve our chances of feeling happy and being healthy. And we're going to go over some of the science to boost your confidence, to incorporate these changes for yourself and for your loved ones. And lastly, I'm going to go over my top tips to get started on this health journey. But I really want you to understand the process and how food can affect our mood. And to do that, we have to begin with the gut-brain axis. The food we eat is really information. These molecules break down and interact with our hormones and our immune system and our gut bugs to ultimately be incorporated into our DNA. It's actually possible to detect microRNA from some of the foods that we eat, for example, mRNA from cow's milk that we drink, meat that we eat, and even the crops that we eat, including rice, have been detected circulating in our bloodstream, meaning that we can take the phrase "you are what you eat" very literally. And there are 3 main ways that this nutritional information interacts with our gut to affect our mood: the vagus nerve, the lymphatic system, and the microbiome. So the vagus nerve conveys information from the base of the brain, the medulla oblongata, to the gut and back up again. This means that our gut talks to our brain just as much as our brain talks to our gut. Maybe even more so, as more information is conveyed to the brain than the other way around. And what about our immune system? Well, our gut is only 1 cell thick, our gut lining, I should say, and most of the immune cells in our body reside here, our first line of defense against the pathogens from the outside world getting in. They're known as the GALT, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, and these immune cells send critical messages to our bodies about what is safe and what needs to be attacked. Lastly, the bugs that live in our gut communicate with each other and with our gut lining to affect our health and our mood. It's amazing. There are more microbes in our gut than there are stars in our entire galaxy. They can affect how we think, what we eat, and how we feel. These microbes do have a number of amazing functions, but importantly for this talk, they can manufacture serotonin and modulate dopamine, 2 important neurotransmitters that can affect our mood. So, we now understand that the most changeable and fluid aspect of this 3-part interplay between the vagus nerve, the immune system, and the microbiome is indeed these bugs in the microbiome. So what do we need to know about how the microbiome can be damaged and repaired? Well, it helps if you can feed the bugs that you want and starve the ones that you don't. And how do we help good gut bugs thrive? By giving them prebiotics. What are prebiotics, I hear you say? Dietary fibre. So in other words, we give them fruit, vegetables, whole grains and beans. These foods are broken down by our gut bacteria into short-chain fatty acids. These are special compounds that can go inside the bloodstream and let the brain know that everything is okay, as well as modulate our immune system responses. Fermented foods are helpful too, providing some of the healthy bacteria in pre-fermented form. These would include things like pickle, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, and kombucha. What can be harmful to our gut bugs? Well, specifically when it comes to foods, saturated fats can weaken the tight junctions of the gut, allowing damaging lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, through the gut lining and into the bloodstream, which can cause inflammation and contribute to stress, depression, and anxiety. Other things like highly processed shop-bought biscuits and cakes and pastries and chicken nuggets and other processed meats, white sugary breads, sugary soft drinks, emulsifiers in food, of which there are many, artificial sweeteners, alcohol and smoking are all things that can kill off our beneficial gut bacteria. And there are other things in our modern lives which can also play a part. Things that we have no control over, like whether we were caesarean born or breastfed, but also things that you might not think of, like lack of sleep and psychological stress and over-exercising, even things like using antibacterial soaps and mouthwashes. They can all contribute, even living in an urban environment. The most obvious thing that really does contribute is taking antibiotics. Now, I'm not against antibiotics. They've been very useful and they've increased our average lifespan by about 15 years, but we are overusing them, both in the animal agriculture industry and in the community. And taking antibiotics can mean it takes up to 2 years to build a beneficial microbial population again. And even other medications can sometimes play a part, like certain antacids and painkillers. So try not to worry if many of these apply to you, because in all honesty, they apply to most of us. And with this knowledge, we also have the power to alter and nurture our microbes through what we eat and our daily activities to help us heal and thrive. Okay, so what does the science say about the foods we eat and how they can affect our mood? Well, this meta-analysis was published in February 2019 in the Psychosomatic Medicine Journal, looking at nearly 46,000 people, and it concluded that diet changes can significantly improve anxiety. Researchers reviewed 16 studies that reported effects of healthy dietary interventions on depression and anxiety, and diets that reduced the intake of fatty foods like processed meats led to significantly decreased symptoms of depression compared with control diets. Increased intake of fibre and minerals and vitamins from fruits and veg may improve pathways related to depression, including inflammation and oxidative stress. So, have there been actually studies to show that food can reverse depression? Well, actually, yes. There is evidence that this is the case. This is a great randomised controlled trial called the SMILES trial, which was published in 2017, and it was one of the first interventional trials looking at using nutrition specifically as a tool for remission of depression. 67 participants undertook a modified Mediterranean diet, which in 1 week consisted of 6 servings of veg, 3 servings of fruit, 5 to 8 servings of whole grains, 1 serving of nuts and olive oil, 2 to 4 servings of meat and fish, and 2 to 3 servings of dairy. Within 3 months, 1/3 of the diet group achieved remission, 1/3, versus only 8% of the group who received social support. So 4 times the amount of people felt better through improving their diet. And here is another larger randomised controlled trial, which also shows that our mood can be directly impacted by our food. This one took place in an American insurance company, and they took nearly 300 people across 10 cities who were either overweight or diabetic. In the intervention group, they were given a once-weekly verbal instruction about plant-based foods and health. They were then given the opportunity to choose fully plant-based meal options at the workplace canteen if they wished to. So there was no specific coercion and there was no control over their intake at any other time of day. What's interesting is that the study found that the intervention group not only had a statistically significant improvement in their weight and their lipid levels and their average blood sugars, their HbA1c, but they also had a statistically significant improvement in depression, anxiety, and productivity scores. So there was something about the food that made them feel better in their minds as well as their bodies. Is there anything about specifically vegetarian eating patterns that might help mood? Well, there was a population-based study here on the left from Taiwan, which showed that on following 1,600 elderly people over a period of 4 years, increasing vegetable consumption seemed to cut the relative risk of depression by a whopping 62%. And on the right, a randomized controlled trial involving 39 omnivores showed that restricting animal products seemed to boost their mood. They found significant improvement in mood scores after just 2 weeks of adopting a plant-based diet compared to those who stuck to their pescatarian and omnivore diets. So is their mood just better because they were eating more vegetables or less of other things? Why would the plant-based eaters be happier than those who are eating fish? Meat is a high tryptophan food, and we need tryptophan, the amino acid, to make serotonin, which is the feel-good neurotransmitter. So logically, it would follow that eating high tryptophan foods like chicken and eggs and cheese would thus boost serotonin. Well, no, actually it doesn't. High-protein diets don't seem to work. This is thought to be because other amino acids in higher protein foods crowd out the tryptophan for access to the brain. A 2003 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that higher healthy carbohydrate meals actually increase the bioavailability of tryptophan. Seeds like sesame seeds and sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds and butternut squash, for example, and other foods like lentils, beans and nuts are fantastic because they contain tryptophan and they also contain the fibre needed to make it more bioavailable. Win-win. And this does seem to fit with a large randomised controlled trial published in the Archives of Internal Medicine about 10 years ago, involving 106 obese or overweight participants, which showed that over the course of a year, a healthy high-carb diet approach to weight loss had the same effect on the weight of the participants as the low-carb diet, but significantly improved their depression, anxiety, and overall mood scores. Are there any other reasons? Well, one of the other contributors could be the types of fat that we're eating and making, which can either increase or reduce our inflammatory response. This slide shows both omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. Now, they're both important. Linoleic acid and alpha-linoleic acid from our foods can be used to make omega-3 fatty acids and omega-6 fatty acids. And these are important because they must come from food and we can't make them. Now, there are many factors contributing to inflammation in the body, and this is one of them. Again, omega-3 and omega-6 can both be helpful, but it's the enzymes in our body and our gut microbes that help determine whether pro or anti-inflammatory compounds are made. And it seems that when the good fats are crowded out by the bad fats, so to speak, less of the helpful protective compounds are made. So, what does this look like on our plate? Well, we crowd out the vegetable oils and the farmed and processed meats and the junk food fats with small wild-caught oily fish or walnuts or flax seeds or chia seeds and hemp seeds, and also algae oil supplements. You see, saturated fats from junk food and animal products and trans fats from other kinds of oils like margarine, cooked at high temperatures, as well as crisps, deep-fried food, pastries and processed meats, can all push the body into an inflammatory state, in part by increasing the amount of omega-6 over the omega-3s. And this can have a profound effect on our mood. One study published in 2014 reported a greater likelihood of suicide and major depression in early pregnancy associated with eating more omega-6 fatty acids. What else can increase our inflammatory response? Something called homocysteine. Homocysteine is an amino acid found mostly from eating meat and dairy, smoking, coffee and alcohol. All these things can raise the amount of homocysteine in our body. And high levels of it are linked to the early development of heart disease. And crucially for this talk, are also linked to depression. How do we reduce it? Well, we have to break it down. And vitamins B12, B6 and folate do that job really nicely. So if we're low in any one of those three vitamins, it can cause an increase in homocysteine. B12 comes from bacteria in the soil, hence the reason it's also found in the meat of animals who have been grazed on land, because they've eaten the grass and the soil, and therefore they've had the B12 in their muscles. So farmed animals need B12 supplements in order for their meat to contain it. I'd recommend fortified foods or supplements of B12 for anyone enjoying a plant-based diet, as well as anyone over the age of 50 or who have autoimmune disorders, celiac disease or inflammatory bowel conditions, which would interfere with B12 absorption. Common antacids and diabetes medications will also affect B12 absorption, so do take a supplement or arrange a blood test if you're not sure. So, what else can we do to bring it down? Well, as I said before, the other vitamins involved are B6 and folate, which are found in abundance in whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts and seeds. We can also consider reducing our smoking and alcohol consumption to help bring it down. Exercise has also been shown to help lower homocysteine levels. So could you get the same benefits from a folate vitamin? Well, not necessarily. Folate vitamins, mainly from green leafy vegetables, also play a role in helping our mood. So on the left is a prospective follow-up study which showed a low dietary folate increased the risk for severe depression by as much as 3 times. But the same benefits for mood from having folate in food are not found with folate supplements. In fact, sometimes adverse effects are noted. And the NANES survey is another example of this. It measured the carotenoid phytonutrients, it showed that carotenoids from foods like carrots, as you might expect, had a dose-response curve to lift the mood in those who were participating in the survey. So it seems like natural antioxidants contained in fruits and vegetables, alongside the folate content, can be crucial in reaping the benefits to our mood and our health. Lastly, we must consider the role of artificial sweeteners and fizzy drinks, because they are associated with increased risk of depression. And coffee seems protective in this study, but not 8 cups a day, which in the same study was associated with higher suicide rates. So enjoy your coffee in moderation, please. Aspartame is a type of artificial sweetener, and it seems to lower the seizure threshold in rats. And it also had a severe effect on vulnerable populations who already suffered from mental health problems. The study in the middle here showed that the effect on people with bipolar, for example, caused increased irritability and depression, so much so that the study had to be stopped early. Now remember, artificial sweeteners are present in more than 6,000 products that you can buy. Anything from mints to chewing gum to jelly to cereals to yogurts and to snack bars. So there we go. There's a whirlwind tour of the foods to enjoy more of and the foods to have less of. Let's now move on to my top tips to boosting your mood, both for yourself and for your loved ones. Eat a variety of whole plant foods. If you hadn't got that message already, I'm just letting you know again right now. From what we've learnt today, this can boost serotonin, it can increase the micronutrient profile, it can boost tryptophan availability, and it reduces homocysteine levels. Make sure you're mixing up all the spices and flavours and sensations and textures in your mouth, and don't let the food industry fool you into reaching for the junk food. Instead, why not try dipping a crunchy carrot in a creamy hummus, for example, to vary the textures in your mouth, and use flavours to your advantage. Make new mixes of spices, maybe add some Marmite or miso or hoisin to create dishes brimming with flavour without all the extra empty calories. From this talk, you will also realise the importance of protecting your gut bugs. So how do we do that? Well, only take antibiotics when absolutely necessary and minimise how many factory farmed meats that you eat, please. So that therefore will also minimise your antibiotic exposure among other toxins. Try to avoid all non-essential medications and cut out the antibacterial soaps and sprays. You don't actually need them in your home. Consider taking a probiotic if you think that you need to, and avoid buying processed and packaged foods as much as you can. If you don't own it, remember you can't actually eat it. And my last tip is to consider limiting foods that stimulate formation of toxic byproducts that can damage your heart and your kidneys. And these would be foods that are high in carnitine and choline, which is predominantly found in meat and eggs. What else can we do that doesn't involve diet? Well, finally and most importantly, I believe that we have to find a better way to deal with our life's stresses. I like to look at the example of the blue zones. These are the areas of the world with the highest healthy longevity. And this picture shows 2 Loma Lindens. These are Seventh-day Adventists. They're a really well-studied population because they live so long and they generally look after their health. On the right, you see a picture of Dr. Ellsworth Wareham. He was a pioneering cardiothoracic surgeon who was 104 years old when he died in December 2018. And he was still walking regularly and driving his car, and he was still working as a surgeon until he was 95 years old. And what does Dr. Wareham think? Well, I'll quote him now. He says, "I think it's important for an individual to have some security and peace in his life. And I get that from believing in a loving, caring God, you see. And so, if he's in charge of my life, why sit around and worry? I mean, he takes care of the universe. He can certainly take care of me, so I don't worry." This is a lovely message, and it does really highlight the importance of having some other kind of meaning or purpose in life and getting well-being from perhaps outside of ourselves. And, I do also want to highlight here that mental illness is complicated. So telling someone who is suicidal or has a medical condition that they should just eat more broccoli or get a hobby totally undermines the seriousness of the condition. But what is interesting in the Adventist health studies is that many of these elderly people had adverse childhood events that would have had the potential risk to cause mental health problems. But they shared certain factors in common which minimized the risk. These things included strong and long-lasting social bonds with family and friends, prioritizing living an active outdoor life with daily physical activity, having spiritual activities and habits like attending a church or a community, and cooking at home, maybe even growing your own foods if you can, having abundant fruits and veg and limiting their meat and junk food, and having healthy sleep routines, managing about 8 hours a night on average. They also tended to have a hopeful outlook and also wanted to emphasize giving a helping hand to other people, which to me means really a focus on compassion. So could you incorporate a few of these factors into your own life? I don't think we can all live exactly like the Loma Lindens in California, but I can think of a few things that I could change in my own life. so that I could live happier and healthier. So one of those things that's easiest is really what you put on the end of your fork. And this step could make all of the others a little bit easier to imagine. Ultimately, some of us will suffer from mental health issues despite including all of these tips into their lives, because human emotions and experiences are often far more complicated and nuanced than what can be covered in a talk like this. So please do seek help if you need it, from your doctor or a therapist, a family member or a friend. But know that if you're able to make these changes, as many of my patients have discovered, surprising changes in your mood can take place as well. Loving the foods that love you back may mean you find yourself with a little bit more love for your own life as well. Thank you so much for listening.